Okay. All right, guys, welcome to Men on Fire, May 6th, 2020. We promised to provide all the answers to life tonight, the secret to happiness, so we'll see how far we can get down that road. But first of all, we're going to watch a couple videos of a guy who seems to have it all in modern day, Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So here we go. This first video is, it's hard to grasp really how much money he actually has. And so this guy tried to do that with pieces of rice, and this is what he did.
The scale of $1 billion is really crazy. So let's say 1 grain of rice is equivalent to 100K, and 10 grains of rice would be then $1 million. Well, how much is $1 billion? So my Saturday night consisted of counting 10,000 grains of rice, one by one, just to show you guys how much $1 billion is. Of course I filmed it, and of course I time-lapsed it, and this is playing at, I don't even know, God knows how fast it's playing at, but so now I'm proud to present to you the results. That is $1 billion, where each grain of rice is worth 100K. Look how much rice this is, guys. That's crazy. I just bought you like a Lamborghini right here, and I didn't even notice it was gone. Here's a $5 million house in California, and oh look, I still have all this money. Well, a lot of you guys asked me, well, how much does Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos have in terms of rice? So that was my mission, and I went to Costco. I got the rice, I brought it home, and once I brought it home, I went to work. I also want to say that I have 5 families that are going to take this unused rice, so it's totally not wasteful. Okay, so the moment you've been waiting for, 100K, 1 million, 1 billion, Jeff Bezos has 122 of these, or 58 pounds of rice, if each grain of rice was 100K. Like, look how big this is, guys. I'm gonna show you the scale here. I'm gonna put a keyboard in just for fun. Look how deep that goes. That's insane. This is Jeff Bezos' new house that's $145 million in LA. And then, oh my God.
All right, so he's got a lot of money, and I thought it was really cool to make that kind of analogy there to rice. But what does he spend it on? So with somebody that has that much money, what in the world does he spend it on when basically anything in the world is his fingertips? And well, here's what he does.
Amazon is the primary source of Bezos' considerable wealth. He founded the company in 1994, and today he's the CEO and largest stockholder with a 16% stake in the company. As the Amazon stock price increases, so does its leader's wealth. Since its IPO in 1997, Amazon's split-adjusted stock price has increased 97,000%. Amazon has turned into a brand that touches almost every aspect of life and has grown through lucrative acquisitions and investments. In 2009, Amazon purchased the online shoe retailer Zappos for $1.2 billion. In 2017, the company bought Whole Foods for $13.7 billion, giving Amazon a hold on 18% of the U.S. online grocery market. And in February of 2018, the company unveiled Amazon Web Services, its $17.5 billion cloud computing business. Not surprisingly, the richest man in the country is also one of the largest landowners in the country. He owns a 5.3-acre home in Medina, Washington that's valued at $25 million. His estate neighbors the second richest living person, Bill Gates. Bezos also owns a $23 million townhouse in Washington, D.C., neighboring the Obamas and Ivanka Trump. On top of that, he has a $25 million mansion in Beverly Hills and 3 apartments in New York City that total a value of $17 million. And finally, his largest real estate purchase is a 30,000-acre ranch in Van Horn, Texas, that serves as a base for his space exploration company, Blue Origin. But we'll get back to that. To get around to all his homes and investments, Bezos owns a $65 million Gulfstream jet. Unlike his billionaire peers, Bezos doesn't engage in public philanthropy very often, but he has made large donations to Mary's Place, an organization that supports Seattle's homeless population, as well as the Dream US, which supports people protected by the DREAM Act. He does, however, publicly invest in and fund projects. In 2013, Bezos funded and led an expedition to recover one of the rocket engines from the Apollo 12 mission from the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. On his request, NASA donated it to Seattle's Museum of Flight. In early 2018, Bezos provided $42 million in funding for the 10,000-year clock through the Long Now Foundation. The clock is meant to be a symbol of long-term thinking. He's made a number of investments and acquisitions through his venture capital firm, Bezos Expeditions, and he's personally invested in Google, Uber, Airbnb, and more, including his 2013 purchase of the Washington Post for $250 million. But his most ambitious venture has been Blue Origin. Its rocket New Shepard has had several successful test flights, and it's currently developing a larger rocket called New Glenn. He liquidates $1 billion of Amazon stock per year to fund the project and its goals of supporting large-scale human spaceflight and colonizing the solar system. And he plans to use all his wealth to fund space exploration. Bezos believes it's his most important work. He hopes Blue Origin will increase human production and efficiency and will help avoid civilization stasis.
So Jeff Bezos, in the world today, 2020, is the closest thing to King Solomon, and in terms of wealth. And we'll look more at that later to see why really he doesn't even compare to King Solomon in what you look about on the stats. But we're continuing our study with Patrick Morley's book, How God Makes Men. And the last few that we looked at Gideon a couple weeks ago, and how God makes men by turning our weaknesses into strengths in such a striking way that only he gets the glory. And then last week was David, where we talked about God makes men by doing whatever it takes to correct and restore us when we go astray. So I don't know if you thought about the question for the week of how has God restored you, or what does he need to do to restore you? But hopefully you reflected on that this past week. And then we're moving to Solomon. God makes men by making it impossible for us to find lasting happiness in any pursuit apart from him. And so Solomon, let's see here. So anyway, the story of Solomon has a good analogy to kind of men today, period. When we think of what gives us satisfaction in life, or what things that we pursue, I don't know what that is for you. If you could dream and have anything that you wanted right now, maybe it's that new vehicle. Maybe it's like the biggest screen in the world, television, that nice riding lawnmower. Tim and Becky has one of those, by the way. Anyway, big house, white picket fence, the ideal living space. Pretty awesome. If you had, some of you guys would love to have a shop like that in your garage. I'm lucky if I can get a car in mine, but laid out, or I like my man cave, but man, it's nothing like the one on the bottom there and stuff. Set up like a theater, rotates on the rounds so you can look at different TVs for different things. I noticed there's no Cubs on the wall, so sorry, Mike Lee. Anyway, or just maybe it's a certain amount of cash. There's a certain thing, I mean, just to have money, to be able to have it, to do what you want when you will. Different people have different pursuits in life and goals. And maybe we don't want all the money in the world, but maybe we just want just enough to reach that next level, whatever that is for us. But men for centuries have tried to have that our pursuits, to find things and find stuff. And yet somehow we're frustrated and we're miserable. And why? When men have achieved all these different things and have everything that they wanted, they still find themselves in life with something missing. Something, they have a lot of stuff, but that one thing, and it seems to be a really big thing that's missing, that just tortures us, and we can't buy that. And it takes some of us a long time to finally realize that. King Solomon, just to put in perspective, he was the richest guy that ever lived, ever in history, and probably will be for all time. In 39 years of reign, history tells us that he got around $40 billion, about 25 tons of gold tribute every single year. And so it put his net worth at the end of his reign at $2.2 trillion. An amazing amount of money to even fathom. So it dwarfs Jeff Bezos, it dwarfs Bill Gates. It's just an unbelievable amount of cash that he had at his disposal to do what he wanted with and stuff. I touched my screen, so I got to do this. So God comes to Solomon when he decides that he's going to be king, and he asks him and says, "What do you want?" And this is before he has any of that wealth. And Solomon gives a pretty good answer to that, and it leads to actually God giving him what he didn't ask for. And so here's kind of a short review of what actually happened.
That night, God spoke to me in a dream.
Solomon, ask for anything you want, and I will give it to you.
My father, David, your servant, was honest and did what you commanded. You've made me king in my father's place, but I'm very young and know so little about being a leader. Please make me wise and teach me the difference between right and wrong. If you don't, there is no way I could rule this great nation of yours.
Solomon, I'm pleased that you asked for this. You asked for wisdom to make right decisions. So I'll make you wiser than anyone who has ever lived or ever will live. I'll also give you what you didn't ask for. You'll be rich and respected as long as you live, and you'll be greater than any other king.
And he was.
So we come into Morley's book where he explains that Solomon wrote Proverbs, he wrote Ecclesiastes, he wrote songs. He was a botanist, zoologist, he's a shipper, a magistrate. He had he was the most intelligent man in the world. It says that queens and leaders from other parts of the world came to him just to be in his presence because of his wisdom, because of what he knew. And he tried to fill it with all these things. And he was a writer, and he was a horse collector, and he tried to look at all these things in his life that he could find to fulfill himself and to find an ending and to find happiness. So he made that cognitive effort to gather. And you see here the temple. He built the temple. They said it was like the biggest, the most luxurious building ever constructed. And so now we get into our next screen here, where he said, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired." He actually made an effort, a cognitive effort, to get to do as much as he possibly could do. He said, "I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had worked to achieve." That's in Ecclesiastes 2:4-10. So in the book Ecclesiastes, he finds out that all these things, all that he's done, all that he collected, all that he knew, all his wisdom meant nothing in just that pursuit. Even though God gave him all that, it was really, he found out that it was useless and frustrating, and it was eluding him, and it was like smoke and mirrors. So now we're going to show you another short video about Ecclesiastes in an animated form, and a little more of Solomon and the good life.
Then we come to Ecclesiastes, who's more like this sharp, middle-aged critic. And he says,
"You think using wisdom will bring you success. You'd better think again, because life here under the sun is meaningless.
And that's a phrase he uses a lot in this book.
But to understand this book, we have to realize first that we're hearing two voices.
So first there's the teacher, and we've been calling him the critic. He's the main voice in the book.
But he is introduced to us by another figure, the author. And he's the one who's collected the critic's words, and then at the end of the book summarizes everything and gets the final word.
So why does the author want us to hear from the critic?
Well, he wants to turn your view of the world upside down, and he's going to let the critic explore three really disturbing things about the world.
And we should warn you, these are pretty intense.
Yeah. So the first is the march of time, or as the critic says,
Generations come and generations go, but the earth, it's been here long before us and will be long after. No one remembers people from long ago, and all the people yet to come, they too will be forgotten by those who come after them.
So, on a cosmic scale, you and I, we are just a blip. Stars are born, and then they die and form planets which orbit new stars, and those planets, they change over time and eventually burn out.
And amidst this cosmic backdrop, my entire existence is like a blink in time.
Which leads to the critic's second disturbing observation, that we are all going to die.
Humans face the same fate as the animals, death. All people, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, those who offer sacrifices to God and those who do not. They all share the same destiny. All this activity and madness, then we all join the dead.
Man, this book is depressing.
And so is the final disturbing thing for the critic, and that is life's random nature.
So in Proverbs, life isn't random. There's a clear cause and effect relationship between doing the right thing and being rewarded.
But the fact is that life doesn't always work that way. The critic has observed a glitch in the system. He calls it chance, or in his words,
the race doesn't always go to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food always come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the educated. Time and chance happen to them all.
So his point is that you can't really control anything in life. It's just way too unpredictable.
So if I want to master life,
then you're setting yourself up for a fall. Now, throughout the book, the critic uses a metaphor to tie together all of these disturbing ideas. Nearly 40 times he says that everything in life is hevel. It's a Hebrew word that means smoke or vapor. Like smoke, life is beautiful and mysterious.
It takes one shape, and before you know it, it takes a new shape.
And smoke looks solid, but try and grab it, it'll slip right through your fingers.
And when you're stuck in the thick of it, like fog, it's impossible to see clearly.
Now, our modern translations have lost the metaphor, and they usually translate hevel as meaningless. But if you read closely, the critic isn't saying that life has no meaning, but rather that its meaning is never clear. Like smoke, life is confusing, it's disorienting and uncontrollable.
So, what are we supposed to do with all of this?
Well, surprisingly, the critic first of all acknowledges the perspective of Proverbs. He says it's a really good idea to learn wisdom and to live in the fear of the Lord.
Really? I mean, he just said that doesn't guarantee success.
But he knows it's the right thing to do. But secondly, and more often, he says that since you can't control your life, you should stop trying. Learn to hold things with an open hand, because you really only have control over one thing, and that's your attitude towards the present moment. Stop worrying, he says, and choose to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, or the sun on your face, or a good meal with people that you care about.
The simple things in life.
Yes, and both the good things and the bad, because both are rich gifts from God. And that's the surprising wisdom of Ecclesiastes.
Listening to the critic is painful and can lead you into some dark places.
And that's why the author speaks up at the end of the book. He doesn't want you to lose hope. He wants to make you humble into someone who trusts that life has meaning even when you can't make sense of it, that one day God will clear the hevel and bring his justice on all that we've done. And so he tells us that the proper response to all of this is to fear the Lord and keep his commandments.
And that's the book of Ecclesiastes.
Wow, pretty dire. But what he's concluding here is without God, there is really nothing left. What's that? The birth, the in-between stuff, and then death. So there really isn't anything. Rick Warren says this: without God, life has no purpose. Without purpose, life has no meaning. Without meaning, life has no significance or hope. So that's what Rick Warren says. But what does Solomon and God say through Solomon? He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their work. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will revere him. And this is in what Morley talks about in revering God. We can be happy short term, like the smoke that dissipates, but really in all, in being eternally joyful is done when we do that with God and through his word. And so versus what we want to how what we want will make us feel, it's that feeling, right? It's not the actual item, the new car, the new thing, the amount of money, the whatever it might be that's separate from God. It's how we feel that that we're really driving for. So, and with Solomon, one of the two things he mentions in Morley's book is the two major stumbling blocks that we can learn from Solomon. One was sex. And Solomon had plenty of sex. He says in the book, Solomon really had a sexual addiction. Between his 700 wives plus 300 mistresses, he really took even that to the extreme. So the other conclusion, or the second part of the conclusion, one is sexual, and the other for men, or for other humans actually, is that he had turned not only from the sexual addict, but his wives and mistresses turned him away from God. And that was a conflict. So what he knew what was right and true worship to a true God, the wives that he had turned him away, and he built other buildings and temples for their gods and actually worshiped as his wives and mistresses did. So the other battle that we have as men, as humans have, one is the sexual part, and the next part is the two worlds, how we try to combine the two things. So how God deals with these idols is in these three manners. So he can withhold the thing we think we can't live without, or he can remove the thing we think we can't live without, and then give us so much of it that we actually gag on it. And that is covered in this chapter with Morley, how he refers to those things. These are the options. If we live a life separate and make these things idols, these are our only three options separate from him. So it's not just wanting these things, but how they make us feel. So our question for this week, and going into small group, is what is more valuable to you than your relationship with God?